first up is to approve the minutes from April 12th, 2017. And I'd like to welcome our new recording person, Melissa Donaldson. Thank you very much for
Welcome,
helping us.
Melissa. Thank you.
And entertain a motion to approve the minutes from April 12th. Second. Jess, you had some changes you wanted to make to that?
I just had one change under section 7 on the third page under consider personnel actions. Under letter B, there is a space and then it says motion by Mr. Mahood. That actually happened before B. So if you could just move that up in between A and D.
The agendas are on the corner of the table, if that's what you're looking for. I thought you might be.
Any other changes?
No, not by for me.
All those in favor? On to citizen comments. Anything at this point?
I'm gonna leave in a little bit, but I just wanted to check in about the preschool planning, so if there's a time for that that's slotted, I can do it then, or I can.
It's under old business, which is coming up pretty quickly.
Okay,
So,
cool, that's perfect.
Cool.
Talk about it?
Anything else at this point? Move on to presentation of school FYI items. Okay, we'll move on to old business, and that brings us to preschool.
Yay. There you go.
So I'll maybe talk about what we've done so far, and then you can ask whatever questions you have. So John Stokey and myself did a walkthrough again of the space with Gail Doctor, looked at the playground, looked at the layout over there at the preschool, and talked about a few things that we would need to tweak in order for them to welcome us and in order for us to feel like it was going to work for kiddos. So we went back to our respective drawing boards, and we'll meet again next week to kind of condense all of our notes. I do know from that conversation that I will be needing to update the financial projections because there will be some changes to those expenses and expenditures. And I was aiming at perhaps fall for that, to give myself the summer to pull that all together and have another more accurate, detailed financial outlay put together for that.
So just as far as timelines go, you would be coming back to us in the fall, and that would be with updating financial projections. Are there any other changes that you're kind of...
She, at the same time, will be putting together the information she gathered from me and us, John, and presenting that to the board to try to get them to move on, yes or no, whether they would welcome us first, and that would be the first step.
Her board.
Her board,
Okay.
yes.
I'm sorry, who was the person you met with?
Gail Doctor, she's the pastor at the Jackson Community Church.
Do you have the spelling of the last name?
D-O-K-T-O-R.
So that'll be simultaneously that you're looking at numbers, they'll be doing their thing, not, they're not
Well,
gonna be
before I work up the numbers, I'll wait to be sure that
Yeah.
they're happy and they're welcome and it will be
Yeah.
a possibility, and then I'll work up the numbers, hopefully for next fall.
And you'll go back and tweak and review the final presentation given to this board to make sure it still looks good to you.
Right, there will need to be some changes in the financial documents that I'm aware of
Right,
now,
but,
so-
but just in terms of programming and things like that,
Right.
you'll keep an eye on that too.
Yes.
And the financials, and then I guess that's it. Okay. Do you think you would be asking us to make decisions for the next academic year at that point?
That was
Or
our
are we
goal,
still-
that was our
okay.
original goal, to look at whether it could happen for the following year, so.
Okay.
So earlier in the fall might be better, and that way we've got a month or two before the budget season to talk about it, look at it, and ask any more questions.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you'll follow up on that through the summertime, and we get to the fall, and probably don't need to be seeing a contract up front, but if things look good at that point in time, then probably the next step would be to try to contractualize some sort of setup with the church, so that we would have something real to talk about and consider. And then in the fall, probably about it then to see where we go from there. It's probably how that process will unfold at this point. I think the major hangup from last year was not having a solid contract in place
Right.
with the church. So I think if we're going to consider something seriously, that would be one part of the stuff that we want to accomplish before we started to move forward with public hearings and so that we can answer that end of the piece.
And Gail, you'll keep up on any structural changes or infrastructure that they'll need to make. I know that was one of the discussions we had early on with them, if they need to have walls in place or exits, or, there were a couple things.
Right, yeah.
And then making sure that their board and their stakeholders and whoever owned different parts.
Right, Gail is on top of all of those
Okay.
pieces and communicating with those two different committees,
Okay, great.
as well as her desire to continue to utilize the church space and what her hopes are for the use of the church.
Sure.
Question?
Yeah, thank you. So Sasha Tracy, and I'm fairly new to this process, and so you'll forgive sort of my rigor here, but I'm just curious if this committee has a practice of setting more specific deadlines, because I hear a really great plan here. I've also managed a lot of really well-intentioned projects, and when we say, when we're ambiguous about timing, it tends to slide, and I just wonder if maybe, Gail, if there's support that could be offered to you in order to meet specific deadlines, but to really name, by fall, are we talking about September 1 or are we talking about November 30th? Because I feel like there's a really big difference there, and I think it'd be very easy to have a complex project like this slide, and then it's March again, and we're back in the same place of, oh, we don't have enough information, let's kick this forward again.
That's a very fair point to make, and I think that what we're going at this point is we're going with the framework that the committee had put together. And we haven't moved beyond that or in any other direction, so that framework's still in place with those costs, and there was a fairly complete committee work that had been done. So that's what we're looking at. We're not looking at anything different than that. The challenge with where we were last year with and why we didn't bring it forward was because the space became a question, and it still is. And there is no timeline to necessarily have that complete by June or by July. At this point, she's going to work on that over the summertime, get the details worked out with that. And if it looks like the space is going to be something that we can move forward with, and the church is the only space we're looking at this point, we're not deciding to look for other spaces at this point in time. That's what we are looking at for space. If it's going to be available and it's something that can work, she'll come back to us and let us know that, and at that point in time, we'll start to design an actual contract that we would be able to use. If some of that happens in between, that's great. If it doesn't, it's kind of hard to target that because you don't want to work too hard on that until you know what the parameters for the space is going to be, if it's going to be available. So if you're a strong proponent of the preschool and you want to see this happen, I can see how that's a little bit disconcerting. You're thinking, okay, are they going to get anywhere given that there isn't really a concrete goal or timeline set up in place? I think that most of the work's been done, and it's just a matter of that space at this point in time. And that probably has to proceed in a way that's, you can't force that sort of thing to happen, particularly in our community. You kind of want to allow, I think, the best thing we can do at this point is to let Gail work with Gail Doctor and go from there. So that's kind of where we're at with things. And we'll make a determination, hopefully in September, if we're going to push it further than that. And at that point, we'll probably be able to have a better timeline for, okay, contract's going to be done by the end of September, and we'll have a public hearing in the first 2 weeks in October, something like that is probably how it will go. But until then, we don't really know. In my mind, everything's pretty complete, other than the space, availability of space.
So Jerry, have other spaces been looked at, or is there a contingency plan around space? Like if it looks, again, like the church isn't gonna come together, is there sort of like a backup thought process?
Well, there may be, and it depends where the board wants to go with it, and we haven't really had that discussion yet.
Okay.
I don't think the committee had any.
Yeah, I mean, I might be able to speak to
Second
two of
option
these
for us.
issues. One, it might provide you a little bit of comfort, Sasha, to know that if you're not involved on this side of the table, when we were asking about what Gail's goal was for completion, or when she would like it for it, that was me basically asking her, Gail, do you want it for the next academic year? Because then what happens is we as a board will need to vote on it by December, preferably
That's
November.
right.
And which
Okay.
means that Gail knows then she's got to get us something by hopefully September, no later than October, because
Great.
we're going to need to conduct public hearings. So there was a lot of conversation there that you didn't know.
Yeah, thank you
haven't
for
been on this
that.
side of the
Really
table.
helpful.
But I think we're all on
We
this side.
probably won't even vote on it, it'll probably go as a warrant article, I'm assuming.
Right.
Right, but we would have to make that decision.
We
to put it
would
as a
either
warrant
recommend it
article.
or not.
Right. So those discussions, so all of that will have to happen in the fall in order for it to go to the next year. And then just as far as space goes,
Yeah.
the committee looked at every possible option and configuration. Basically, everything else was deemed unviable because, for various reasons.
Yeah.
So we had one proposal before us that we are still considering. If something were to happen, like with the church space,
Yeah.
doesn't work or whatever happens, we then will probably go back to the committee information that we had and think, do we now try to push this piece or that piece? And that's something that we would probably keep in a public forum.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the goal is to make a decision on this proposal
Yeah,
with the information we have, and if not, we have plenty of information, the research has been done
okay,
in order to keep it moving forward.
great. And in a hypothetical world, if the church didn't work, do you think that that would move forward such that something would be possible by the following academic year? Does that move it another year down the road?
I think that because, and that's, I guess to be fair to you, Sasha, I think that bumps it up for that year. I think that's the reality of what we're looking at this point in time. Unless
Yeah.
something else happens. Peter?
Yeah, and I will just say, I'm not speaking for the church, just as a church member, that in all my conversations with people at the church, we're very supportive of this happening. The church wants to see this happen. They just want to see it happen in the right way, like anybody else. I mean, they need to protect their interests. And there's a kind of like an hourglass funnel here. You have all these church members and Gale, and you have this whole school community, and you have Gale, and you have the two Gale in the middle. But that's true, because the church structure is such that we need to call a legal meeting, just like the town probably does, to approve this because of the way we're structured. So we're very cognizant of that. They're aware that that needs to happen. They're ready to do that. There was nothing from a building or structural standpoint that the church body didn't seem like couldn't happen. We had a preschool there. It's not, it's just under a different structure. So that being said, the only comment I'll make other than that is that I think, this board and the community has quote unquote studied it a lot, and we've looked at, done a lot of homework. But if there's a vision that if this is going to work from both sides' perspective, that kind of a mental shift has to be made from study to advocacy. I mean, from a community standpoint. If the community doesn't get behind this, it's one thing to say, yes, we're looking at it, but if the community doesn't get behind this on both sides, I would say, and advocate for it, like, we're for this because, I'll be honest, I'm not sure that it will pass because there's a lot of skepticism. So I would just make the comment that as a collective group, those that are for this really need to start thinking about advocating and not just looking at what all the numbers are and what, where this wall might go and, how the ramp goes down. And so, but I totally think it worked. I kicked this hornet's nest how many years ago? Yeah, a long time
At
ago.
least 2, maybe 3.
Yeah, maybe 3. So it's my fault.
So how do we move towards advocacy, and does that happen from a school board level, or does that happen from a community advocacy
You just want to talk to your
committee?
neighbors. You want to talk to your neighbors. You
Yeah.
want to tell them how you feel and tell them why you feel.
But does it make sense to create, I'm not knowing the way all the structures are, like a separate group, or whether it's, citizen-led, like, great, we're going to have a, preschool advocacy group, and we're going to go make sure we talk to people, and that happens completely separate from the school board, or,
It would be separate from us.
Yeah,
We don't even
yeah.
know if we're going to recommend it.
I know that.
Yeah,
Yeah, at this
so
point,
we can't really be a
Yeah,
proponent of
because we don't
something we
know what
don't know.
Mhm.
what it
But maybe
looks like.
maybe that would be a step. that
There's
would be
also a valley-wide group right now looking at early
Exactly.
childhood
Yeah.
education
Yeah.
and maybe getting involved with them. There are outreach and films that they're showing.
I've been a part of a bunch of their
Yeah,
listening sessions.
and start to bring them into Jackson and see if there's some assistance and support they can provide as
Yeah.
well.
And I guess just one more thing on the advocacy front. I guess, when I was in your shoes a number of years ago, there is a point in time where, once most of the details are in place, and I'm not saying all the details, and once you have an agreement in principle, that it is the school board's role to advocate for it if it is in the best interest of of education for the kids in this town. I completely appreciate Keith not being able to be forward until you know some of the details, but there is going to be time when somebody's going to have to jump off the cliff first and kind of say, yeah, we're going to do this, and make a little bit of a leap of faith. Not a huge leap of faith, I think, at the end, but I think as a board, you're going to have to come to some either individual or collective decision and say, yeah, we're for this because.
Well, I think we've all made it
Yeah.
known that we're all
Yeah.
for it in the right, structured the right way and in the right
Absolutely,
situation. You know, that's more what I was saying. I can't really start advocating for something that I don't
Yeah,
really
sure.
know yet what it looks like.
And I think that we were almost there last year, or, earlier this year, but I can't remember when we made
Last
it.
calendar year,
Last
this
calendar
year,
year.
yeah.
And some of the details, I think, was where we got hung up. And I think that we'll get those details ironed out. But you're right, Peter, I think that once we get it to a point where we're comfortable with it, then we do switch from being people that are researching it to people that are going to advocate for it. And that happens separately than the community and the public doing that, because you'll have one faction the community will be opposed to it, and one may be for it, and some might not know. But I think that the process that we went through last year, that we did hear some good ideas. And I mean, just as an example, one of the good ideas I heard from a community member last year from our listening post was the idea of having a sunset clause in it. In other words, because the idea, one of the things that scares people is that if we do this, it's something that's just going to always be done, even if it's not successful. But I think that's something that I'm considering to advocate for. Once we get the details in place, is advocating for that type of thing. Like, let's bring it to the community, but maybe we'll put a sunset clause in. Like, we're going to try it for 2 years or for 3 years, with the idea that we'll review it and see if it's something that we're going to continue.
Great. I think that if there's any other pieces, I've been talking to a number of families in town who are pretty excited about this, and I think that there's a lot of energy for it. So, like, when that timing is right to kind of bring more noise to the advocacy, I think it'd be great to be able to do that. So just maybe you and I can talk as well about, if, for example, in September, all of a sudden we know and there is that this might be going forward if everything gets voted on, then that seems to me like the time to create a groundswell around it, as opposed to doing something now.
Exactly.
So just making sure that we're not coming off the back of it and being like, oh wow, we only have a week to go talk to people, but really that we can build a campaign if there's all these people in the community who are like, yeah, I'll give time, I want to get involved, I want to talk to my neighbors,
And in the short time too, it helps to come and ask a question like Sasha did, to hold our feet to the fire.
Yeah.
So just because I'm comfortable with the way it's going doesn't mean that I've translated that. Sometimes I'm not comfortable with the way that's going down. So it's helpful to have that to come just ask us, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
But wait a minute, you weren't really clear about that. Like,
Yeah.
exactly what's going on. So that's
And I would definitely encourage you to, one, show up at these meetings,
Yeah.
because we need to hear from people that there's support.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard a ton of it because I'm out in the community. I've heard the other side too.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to talk with people that don't share your view,
Yeah, definitely.
because you're both very compelling, intelligent women. So I would like you to advocate for what you believe is right. So on behalf of a project that I've gotten behind. So, get out there. And for some people, they just panic when the decisions have to get made. So if you can get people comfortable with the idea and why you're for it,
Yeah.
you have a different voice than we do, and you have a different ability to do that. So, and certainly, if Gail has said now she's coming back to us in September, even if you can't make a July or August meeting, show up in September.
Yeah.
And if and when it ever makes it to a warrant article situation,
Okay.
show up. Write a letter to the editor of the paper. You know what I mean? Send something to the e-news. Whatever you think
Yeah.
you can do to get your opinions out that's how it's supposed to work, right?
Besides the space too, there's still, and the financial side, there's still lots of things that we didn't even get to yet because we knew it was going to be pretty, like the busing, we didn't really get to how that was going to be handled and that type of thing too, so.
Right, although the proposal did not include busing, transportation, so.
okay. Moving on to the Blaine update. Is that just on, Joe, were you going to address that?
Gail, I can talk to you about it, or Gail can. So we're stuck with the architect. So both doctors in the community get their name in the. So Gail Doctor's husband, Chris, is an architect in Ipswich, Mass, and has volunteered his time to make sure that everything is gone through with an extra fine tooth comb, and then we have a young engineer from H.E. Bergeron, John Maloney, who are on board. And after Kevin read the fine print and said, as a place of public assembly, was that the term? And a place of public assembly, it needs to be stamped, and even though we kind of felt like, okay, when you get an architect to look at it, the architect says, well, I can't look at it without the engineer's numbers, and the engineer says, well, I can't look at it without the architect's drawings, and they go back and forth for a while. Very super receptive to all of our ideas. They are both really involved in the project and moving forward. They're working on the details of, minute details of the type of joinery at every joint to answer questions about snow load and
good. Okay.
pier size and all of those kinds of things. Because the engineer said that he could guess, but he didn't want to put his stamp on it unless he did the numbers thoroughly. So where we thought we were just going to say, hey, can you do this for us? And he would say yes. It didn't happen that way. So that pushed back our timeline. The timbers are all cut and stickered and put aside, waiting for the joinery to be cut into them. And it pushes our building actually raising until next school year. It doesn't make sense to start cutting joinery into timbers if the engineer is going to say you got to change this joint.
So will you make that a 6th grade project for next year as well then? Can you kind of make that
Yeah. So it
continuity?
becomes, and actually Susan coined the term legacy project that we've started using. I think we all kind of liked that. So the phase 1 of the legacy in any building project, the first phase is always developing a plan. So the first part of the legacy that these guys are leaving is completed, signed, stamped plans with site work ready to go. Which is the other part of the phase, is getting the site work ready. Obviously, everything's measured and ready to go. John Stokey, I haven't talked to him in a week or so, and was going to talk to Pat from the town, Pat Kelly, about having the town guys do the excavation. I've been in touch with a concrete contractor. So we're, all of those parts are ready to go, but in Kevin's words, contingent on that he can't approve a building permit without the stamp from the engineer.
So
So,
do you
no,
guys
have you
have-
folks
Seen any of these
drawings? So, yeah.
Have you guys gotten to the point where you have a budget and a maintenance budget and
So, yeah,
a 3 to 5 year plan of what it will cost the school?
kind of.
Okay.
Yes, and kind of no. So Gail, I gave you a little printout of the,
Yeah, I have the prices here. I did not, I apologize, I'll go make a copy afterwards, but this is just the material costs. The timbers were $3,500. Those have already been purchased and they're on site, sitting at John's house, waiting to be prepared to build. Cement was $250. The metal roofing was priced at $1,300. However, we may alter the roof after having some conversations with both the Whitney Committee and some concerns about the noise of the roof, the snow slide off of the roof, and wanting it to blend in with the Whitney Center. So we may be moving it towards an architectural type shingle.
Okay.
And then we just left a miscellaneous budget of $500 to $1,000 for things like metal pegs and nails, whatever.
I think the price of the pegs was included in
Included with
the
the,
timbers.
timbers.
But miscellaneous things like, the lumber that it's gonna take to make the concrete forms, and that kind of depends on the concrete contractor.
Sure, yeah.
And, and how that, and the design that they come up with. The kids met with, the 6th graders met with the architect, and talked about the plan, learned what it's like to be an architect. And John and I met with the architect and the engineer, had a, lengthy meeting with them. We're all confident that before the sixth grade leaves phase one of the project will be done, barring any difficulties with the numbers that the engineer is running. And then just moving forward from there, which is,
It might be a good time to give a little update from the Whitney Center. We just had a meeting today
Okay.
for that Whitney board. And maybe this is fortuitous that you've been bumped back a little bit, just because they, and tell me if I don't report this accurately, but there was some concerns raised that they were not brought in earlier for the committee, and also to the size of it. So, nothing that necessarily meant you had to change anything, but they just were hoping that people were talking about it and thinking about the size and the budget for it, and the fact that we have other public spaces that people could use. So when we were there in the meeting, I didn't have answers to those questions. You know, honestly, I got so excited when the sixth graders came and did such a wonderful job presenting, and it's so exciting to see a practical project and town rallying that. After talking with everyone at the meeting today, I thought, I probably should have asked more questions about budget and maintenance and the ongoing costs. So if there's a way to update us as you go,
Yeah.
even in between board meetings, that would be helpful.
Sure.
I think they're supportive of it. It's just, it seemed like a way bigger project than they had in their mind's eye had thought. So maybe even getting updates out through e-news
Yeah.
so that people know, but, you know, I don't know if you guys have any
I
thoughts on
don't
that.
think there's any cost to the town, though, right? This is
no,
all-
there should be no cost. No cost to the
So
town.
the only maintenance we might have would be if something breaks.
Okay.
Right.
Right, and it is an open building, it doesn't
Yeah,
have
it'd
walls,
be-
it doesn't have
right,
electrical,
it'd
so
be-
it's mainly
yeah.
staining and then replacing the roof eventually.
And obviously, mowing and maintaining the ground under whatever
The drip
that
edge from
comes to,
the
that
soil.
comes to be, that kind of stuff. And John Stokey and I started talking about that, and I don't know, did he give you any
He didn't give me any
ideas about
numbers, no.
that kind of maintenance? But he kind of shrugged and said, not much.
Okay.
You know.
It is staked out back there, so anyone can feel free to walk out there and you can see where the footprint is. It was shifted over a couple of times. We need to be able to access the backfield with a truck. They need to be able to get a propane truck between the Whitney Center and the pavilion. So we moved it over to allow for that and for the snow. You know, there's plenty of room for the snow to be pushed back out there.
And the other thing, in terms of the size, we've talked about adjusting, if anybody feels really strongly about adjusting the size smaller, we probably ought to let the architect and the engineer know sooner rather than later. That's, that's gonna significantly impact the numbers that the engineer has to run. But, it won't impact the joinery, it's all still the same construction, it would be.
I think, Joan,
It's a-
that you look at the space out there, and I think that when I first saw it
Yeah.
mapped out, I was surprised at the size, not in a negative way,
Right.
in a very excited way.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fantastic space for the school, and it was a great project to take on. We've been talking about this, I don't know when this started, but when was the idea of the pavilion?
October, November,
And
presented.
And Mr. Stokey's been involved with it from the start as far as situating it there, and I really do rely on him to figure out where it should be in terms of, he knows better than anybody about snow, roofing snow, and he has a very good plan for that, and I have all the confidence in the world with it, and I think the size of that building is going to make it more usable than what we probably had hoped for, and I think it's great in that regard. I can sympathize with the Whitney Oversight Committee's thoughts that maybe they should have been brought into it early, but we'd had talked about it earlier, and I think that asking them or telling them about it is a courtesy. It's not, the Whitney building is the Whitney building, and that's what the Oversight Committee is for. This isn't part of the Whitney building in any way, shape, or form. It's nothing to do with the Whitney building. It happens to be behind it, but it's not going to affect the Whitney building at all. And
Let me just jump in on that. I don't want to misrepresent them. I don't think they felt like they needed to be making decisions. And in fact, we were talking about how at these meetings you have many hats on. So really, some of the commentary was simply as citizens saying, was there thought given to the public space that is used, that is already in existence and that we're paying for? and how this is a different space. And I think Gail did speak very well to that, which is this is an outdoor classroom that would be open all the time. And in fact, having coached Little League and having an end of the year party over at the Snow Village infield, I said, I wish we had a pavilion that we could have, had that at. So
Yeah.
I think it was just more a question of, are these questions being asked? Are they being answered? And, so.
Yeah, and I think every time somebody has a new question, when we met with the Whitney Board, one of the questions was, did anybody ask about whether you can have a grill underneath a pavilion? And I thought, well, that wasn't a direct question we asked Kevin.
Right.
But it's, now it's on our list of, of things to check on. The other part of it that people had concerns about, and I don't know what part of the conversation you guys were in, Jerry, I feel like you were part of this conversation, was people kind of have this continued concern over the wetlands since the Whitney was built, and all of that wetland stuff was dealt with map after map after map Stokey has downstairs. And Bert Phillips came and, he evaluated it and decided that the situation where we had it was well out of the wetland and, a good, safe place to have it. So that question, came up, and, we called and asked if Bert could come by, and he did help us out with that. And then the shingles, in terms of aesthetics, what we talked about, the question of aesthetics comes up all the time, and it will somewhat reflect the Whitney Center, although Whitney Center's, I think, a 10 pitch, it's a 12 pitch roof that we're going to build, but that's where, we go back and forth. Metal is really easy, but aesthetically it makes more sense to match it to the building it's closest to, kind of thing. We'll have a decorative, they have a decorative king post. We'll have a supportive king post on the side that you see as you're approaching it, so that it reflects it.
Yeah.
And so so when it comes up to those people, those questions we have talked about and thought about.
Yes, sure.
So, sure, yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. We're all learning a lot every day. The kids sat there in awe when Chris Doctor, started talking about the steps that he has to do to build a building.
Mm-hmm.
Kids were like, you have to do all that, and I was right next to the kids going, to do all that. It was pretty eye-opening, pretty
Sounds
cool
like a good learning
experience.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chris left us a beautiful book from his company, so that all of us can dream about having
Beautiful
homes
buildings,
like places Chris has built.
Peter?
Like any community project of varying complexities, I will only make the statement: don't let perfection be the enemy of excellence. If people want to throw sand in the gears, there's always opportunity to do that, but it's important to keep the gears going. I think you do. I think it's a
Thanks,
great,
Peter.
you're doing a great job. I mean, this is a learning. It's a learning experience for a lot of people at a lot of levels. And I think at the end of the day, in 5 years, there won't be too many people that will look back and say, boy, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to keep moving forward. I think it's terrific.
Thanks, Peter.
Right, moving on. Instructional issues?
Smart balance assessments going on.
Oh,
Are you
yes.
done
Also known
Smarter
as
Balance will finish up this week. And they've gone as well as an intense test like that can go. We've had no technology issues. The kids have had a pretty good attitude. The PTO has generously given us pretzels and mints to keep the kids motivated, and it's all good.
Can you smell it still? I'm kind of, like, my
Smell the
room
mint.
smells like peppermint in here. That's why.
There's been research that shows that peppermint helps keep you alert and focused, so.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Let's hope it works out. How long are the assessments at this time of year?
Too long.
These are
They go for approximately 2 weeks,
Okay.
90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the student.
Okay.
Not every single day. We try to take Fridays off as much as we can.
Yeah, it's basically
Well, the third and fourth graders, it's 2 sessions of 90 minutes for language arts, and the same for math. And 5th and 6th grade, it's 3 sessions of both, and we use every single second.
Okay.
And a little bit more in the 5th and 6th grade, yeah, and the 3rd and 4th graders did too. Yeah, it's kind of a good thing the weather hasn't been nice.
That's right.
On to personnel actions. Entertain a motion to elect Melissa Donaldson as recording secretary.
So moved.
Moved and seconded.
Big second.
All those in favor? And welcome again, thank you.
Yes.
Business affairs, budget status report, any questions on the budget? We're still looking at on target to have about a $30,000 unreserved fund balance.
I'm sorry, what was that about the fund balance? I didn't catch
Oh,
what you just.
We'll have about a $30,000 surplus is what we're projecting at this point for
Okay.
at the end of June. And entertain a motion to approve the agreement with Bartlett for school nursing services.
So moved.
Number 2.
Questions, comments?
Basically the same as last year.
The actual budget amount and the actual contract would be helpful to have when we're doing this. I mean, not that we need to read everything every single
Yeah.
time.
So for all of these, because they have to figure out all the health insurance rates and all of those pieces.
Right.
So what we'd be looking for is, you know, the authorization
When the rates are known.
when it comes forward.
And the agreement has gone well? And the
Yes,
nursing
it's
has gone well?
gone very well, and she goes everywhere with her cell phone, so whether she's here getting texts from there, or they're getting texts from here, she's very responsive, right on the ball. We've had no issues with someone waiting for care at all. It's been great, and she's been really helpful. She comes to our Tuesday morning faculty meetings and gets to check in. She's led some yoga, so she's done some extracurricular things as well as just the nursing thing.
Okay.
Weekly mindfulness class. The mindfulness class, yeah.
And she runs the Health and Wellness Committee? Is that
She
right?
participates
She
in it,
participates
Lisa
in it.
organizes it,
Lisa,
but Helen participates in it, yes.
Okay.
All those in favor? Entertain a motion to approve the agreement with Bartlett for library media services.
So moved.
Second.
Questions on that one, comments?
I have something that I would like to notify you that Melissa LaPlante has taken another position. She's going to be working up in Agorum at the Granite State College, or the White Mountain, I guess it is college, and so has resigned from Bartlett. Joe and I will be interviewing this week to hire a new person in that slot, but because we don't pay directly for her salary, we purchase the services from Bartlett. That's why the letter of resignation didn't come forward to you folks, but that's just to let you know.
And just so you know, like in the agreement that we just approved with Bartlett, that's what's referred to in minus the contracted services. These are the contracted
These are
services.
the items, okay.
That we don't pay for
Right.
in the tuition agreement, because we pay for outside the tuition agreement.
Right. And,
She spends 1 day a week here and
okay,
4
that's what I
days a
wanted to
week in
get to. So
Bartlett.
what's the service that we're getting? Can you just flesh it out
Library
just for the
media,
record?
so she's the librarian.
Yeah.
She does classes with all of the children in library every week, facilitates the library collection, does the ordering and purchasing. She does some work with the children in the after-school program. She's done coding workshops and things of that nature, so.
Yeah, I've seen her name on several enrichment things.
Right, and has organized some read-around across America and some things like that at our schools, so.
We're required to have that position.
Right, I just want to make sure things are going well, she's doing what we need her to do.
Yes.
There's no
It's
reason
worked
to
out,
change
it's
it.
worked out very well, yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor? Entertain a motion to approve the agreement with Bartlett for OT services.
Either one, it's fine.
Questions, comments?
so just
Okay,
run us through it.
so, this person works only on a purely IEP need basis, so it varies with, if we get an identified student who either needs an evaluation for occupational therapy or needs to have occupational therapy services, then we contract with her specifically for each child as needed. So she's not like regularly here unless it's a need.
Okay. And that's been going well?
Yes, she's been wonderful, she's been here for quite a while.
And these things are in our budget already too.
Right,
Yes.
I just want to make sure, I mean, I know we've had conversations about the school nurse, even though it was
Yeah.
in the budget, whether that we needed a full-time, I mean, 2 years ago we had, you know, so I
Right.
just want to make sure we're checking in while we're doing this to make sure we're not just rubber stamping it, so, okay.
All those in favor? How we learn about these, Jess, we don't just, that's how, we won't know what we're doing, right?
That's right.
Consider, entertain a motion to approve the agreement with Bartlett for Family Support Liaison Services.
So moved and seconded.
So this is Vicki Garland, who, as you know,
There you go. All right, I love it.
is at the high school, mostly, and works with all of our youngsters and their families, keeps tabs on their report cards, communicates with me on how they're doing, and she also, like, participated in that drug workshop and does some workshops with Victoria Hill, collaborates with her to meet our guidance needs here.
And she seems to be pretty active, really on any level, K through 12.
She is.
Okay.
Yep, she's working half-time at Bartlett School as well, so she's got a nice connection between here and then sees our kiddos in 7th and 8th grade and then follows them right up to the high school,
Okay,
so.
for continuity, okay.
All those in favor? And entertain a motion for the donation to the Friends of the Whitney Community Center in the amount of $5,781.29.
$781.29.
You got it.
Okay.
Move motion.
Second.
So why isn't that number?
Because it's,
We get a larger amount this year?
well, the amount received from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for the Whitney Center funds was $11,562.58. And the breakdown that we used for that is,
50%, isn't it? Is that right?
You're not allowed to use percents, but it's about
Oh,
30.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, and this is the amount that gets channeled into programming, correct?
Yeah, my concern was, I think in our budget, we have 3,000, right? We budgeted that expense.
No, what we budget for is the amount
Pretty sure this year we
under,
started budgeting that, I'm going back now.
what we budget for is what we put into the capital reserve fund for it. So the amount, and so we budget a certain amount that's a little bit less than what we
Oh,
anticipate.
yeah, so
from
it's
it.
the other way around, 2/3 one thing.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So this is the amount that goes into the Friends of the Whitney Center, which, and we do that for budget reasons, so that it can go from year to year, because we have to spend our funds in one fiscal year.
Yeah.
And the idea behind this was to, as a mechanism to channel the attention of the funds, which is from the Whitney Foundation. It's not school funds, it's not taxpayer funds,
Yeah.
it's Whitney Foundation funds. And so this was a way to channel it back into the purpose of that fund. Yeah, so that's why it's.
That's like the flowers that they put over there, et cetera, or does that go in our budget?
We maintain the building and the gardens
Okay.
and all of that. That money goes primarily, they're paying Gloria with it right now, bringing in people to do the programs that are being held there.
And they're using that money, I believe, that was their plan, to subsidize it. They wanted to give scholarships and go off of our rates, our new rate tables over there.
Yes,
Right.
yes, they are
Yes.
subsidizing programs
Yeah.
and
Yeah, they
actually
do that
paying
regularly.
some people to come.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like free, we
Performances.
just had a free movie night that they did for, and it was really basically the Jackson community. I mean, Jackson, the school community. There were a couple of citizens separate, but that was, you know, just show up and do it. So things like that. They actually went through all the programming they've done, and basically, if it's not making money, they're just subsidizing most of it, so.
And so per the agreement that we have with the Whitney Foundation, this is part of how those funds are supposed to be spent. And because we don't have the mechanism to spend money the way the fund intended to spend the money, we channel it back into the Friends of the Whitney so it can be spent as it was intended. So it doesn't have to go through our budget process in order to be spent the way it was intended. So. More questions, comments? All those in favor? Brings us to administrator reports.
Sure, we have a couple of things. One is the personnel committee meeting this Thursday at 10 o'clock. I'll see you guys. And tomorrow, Katie and I will be with Gail, with the Jackson staff, kind of as a follow-up to the board work that we did. I'd like to get the staff input, and then we'll put that back together, kind of that visioning piece, and kind of redefining some of those things there.
And that's tomorrow?
That is tomorrow. We told you that we would talk a little bit about competency-based education tonight. And full disclosure, Katie kind of took this on. And we tried to simplify it because it can be complex for people. Yeah, you can pass those up if anybody would like to take a look at those. And I guess we'll start by drawing your attention to the top line, realizing the full potential of each and every student. And I think that's it. Everybody has that as their vision. And then the picture at graduation. And taking a look at a systems approach to place our students upon graduation in the best position so that they can be successful at their next step. So these are different components here about competency-based education. The biggest thing is really that transference of skills at a higher level. There's a book out there, it's called Off the Clock. And Fred Bramante, this is written by Fred Bramante, who was New Hampshire School Board chair. He was also an educator. And really talks about taking students, and instead of basing their achievement upon seat time as the variable, it really changes that paradigm to trying to control the achievement level. And time is secondary to that. So we don't look at things as far as the industrial model of you're in second grade, so you do second grade work. Then when you go to third grade, you do third grade work. So as we were walking through as administrators up at the Career and Technical Center last week, I was walking through engineering class and talking to a student, and I came across this. And this is a former Jackson student, Liam Haggard. Is it Liam? Aiden, 12th grade? Logan, sorry. So I'm looking at it, and I'm going to pass this around. And this is ski bindings. Yeah, that's what it is. And it's made out of a plastic material. And he designed this on the CAD system. And then he sent the drawings over to a 3-dimensional printer. And it has moving parts. Please don't break it. We borrowed it.
Sign it out today.
But I'm thinking, okay, this kid, really, there's no book that says, on page 1, and you're going to design these moving parts in plastic, and then you have to dip them in a bath where the moving parts then dissolve, and you can turn all the gears within it. And if you were to just take a look at this right here and think about this project and this student and all the components that go with this, and we'll talk a little bit about these, but they work interdependent. That's the key, right? He is applying and transferring all of those skills that he's learned throughout his educational career, if you will, and put those together. So what do you see? Do you see student choice and voice here? Yeah, you bet. You do. Do you see that? Do you see that? So you do. This kid is putting in hours and hours and hours. So there's no time frame that says, well, you have this in, 3 weeks this unit's over, and you don't get to complete this project. He is going back over and over again. when we say anytime, anywhere learning, he has connected with outside folks and engineers, much like the Pavilion Project, right? So you're going to get, I'm sure, some kids are going to be turned on to becoming potential architects or engineers. But the opportunity to transfer those skills, how does he get assessed on this? And it's ongoing over and over again. So he's conferring with Mr. Riddensdale, who says, okay, just remember, you have to design this so that these parts go in, and the tolerance for these parts has to be just so. Relevant, connected curriculum. Do you think that he's learned about physics, and about science and chemistry, and about calculus, and about tolerances? You bet he has. Is he getting credit for this? There's no test necessarily that says an assessment test where he sits down on a computer and answers these standardized questions. No. He has to be able to explain these pieces. He has to be able to know these different competencies in these skills to the point where we can assess. Pretty straightforward. Personalized learning plans. This is pretty personalized. What are you going to know or be able to do as a result of putting this together? These are the big questions that need to be defined related to those standards. And really, the grades are based upon evidence and learning. So take a look at that picture, right? And we did a little bit of a presentation. It's a runner, right? It's a track athlete. And I want to think about this. The old model of taking an average for the grades. Well, think about this. You have somebody who wants to join the track team. First day out, they run a 12-minute mile. But they train, and they practice, and they get better. And then they run an 11-minute mile. And by the end of the season, they run a 9-minute mile. Well, think about it. If we were to average those times together, we would say, oh, you run a mile in 10 minutes and 30 seconds. But if the student can continuously demonstrate that they run a 9-minute mile, shouldn't they get credit for running that 9-minute mile? And that's really a big switch too to that standardized grading and competency grading is you don't get penalized for practicing. Because it didn't come out the first time, do we say you failed this project? Absolutely not. So these are some pieces here that we want you to think about. But the time is not necessarily the variable that we want to pay attention to. It's the learning. So you have to have very solid understanding of the standards and those competencies. So the Pavilion Project, right? I'm sure Joan and John have said, okay, what do we want the students to know and be able to do as a result of building this pavilion? Otherwise, it's just an activity, which is great. But really, what should they be taking out of that? Is it the governmental process? Right? I mean, those are big pieces, trust me. We sat through building a brand new high school in understanding that when you dig and you find an architectural, I mean, an arrowhead. Remember that? In what do you do with the wetlands and how does that all go back? So the key is how do you personalize that for the kids? You know, do they say, yeah, you know what? I'm interested in just the harvesting of the timber. Storing the timber. That's something really, why did we use hardwoods or softwoods? Or what makes the difference between those two? How are we going to be environmentally conscious with this? Can we collect the rainwater off of the pavilion?
Came up.
Sure. All of those pieces. So really, it's allowing the kids to get a real deep understanding of what they're working on. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning. You'll be hearing an awful lot more about this. But really, it is allowing those students to meet them where they're at so that in turn, they can develop the skills and the competence that they need to. but it's allowing for the opportunity for those kids to show what they learn. And that's really what it comes down to. I don't know, Katie, you have anything? Or Gail, feel free to jump in here.
I mean, it's really, like Kevin said, about making sure that when students graduate from high school, that they have what they need in order to be successful, whether that's going to college, going to work, going to the military, whatever that happens to be, that we're not graduating students without those skills, and that we're not holding kids back, so if they're ready to go and they can go more deeper into learning, that they have those opportunities. If there are certain things that are taking more time for them to learn, they have those opportunities as well without penalty. And it's really about them competing against themselves and not competing against one another. I think that's a big piece. And that they take real ownership of their learning. You know, teachers are there to facilitate, to coach, to give feedback, but not to be the guru standing in the front of the classroom and saying, it's, you know, I'm going to fill your head with knowledge. No, it's the student's responsibility to really take that on, and the teacher to really help facilitate that work. And I guess the one other thing that Kevin didn't say is there's a lot of this going on in our schools all the way across SAU 9 right now. The one thing that we don't have is a real coordinated systems approach for it, and looking at how we do that. And one of the things in the book, there is a quote from what's his name?
Henry Ford.
Henry Ford. And in it says, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And it's part of it. One of the challenges with this is that education, we all have a picture. We all had a very probably similar educational experience. Our teachers had that experience. Our community members had that experience. You know, so right now we all have in our heads a picture of what school is, why it's there. That picture no longer is really going to meet the needs of 21st century learners. So, you know, how do we create something different that really does what they need?
I think one of the things I'm most excited about is down here at the bottom, the student-led demonstration of competency. The individual students will be participating in setting their own goals and making decisions about how they're going to achieve those goals, and then actually showing and talking about, it won't necessarily be a Smarter Balance test that we'll use for assessment. It will be the student, kind of like that picture, talking about, this is what my goal was, and I really didn't get there because of X, Y, and Z, or I exceeded my goal because of X, Y, and Z. So it's going to help the kiddos know themselves as learners and be able to plan where they're going and be more effective, hopefully, in pursuing content that's exciting to them, and knowing themselves as a learner and what they need to do to, not comparing themselves to each other, but this is my style, this is what I need.
So you all know I'm already a big advocate of all of this, and I commend you for the work you're doing, because it's exciting to think that this is a transition that we're making in education. I'm thinking of parents and taxpayers that we are answerable to who have a specific view of education. And we're all along the spectrum, right? Some of us are here, some of us are here. And when you think about the process, even with the pavilion, let's use a pavilion as an example, there's going to be a time where that pavilion gets built or not. And that would be the final test for that, to know whether they passed or failed or whatever it is. You know, they might look and say. Now, I was thinking about it today. Gail had mentioned that there might be a time frame delay. And I was thinking of those sixth graders and how wonderful they did, and the hope and excitement that they would be their sixth grade project. And I said, well, you know, how do they feel about that? And she said, well, you know, I think there was some disappointment, but they're rallying and they're realizing that they're part of a process. And then we talked about how great that is to go back to the government work is, hey, how great is that a lesson to learn that it takes forever to do anything, right? And you got to get stakeholder buy-in and, you know, all of that. So that, I think, is actually really one of the better things we could teach them. But the question for you guys would be, how do you fit in so that you can comfort the people who still see school a certain way until they come along? There is a test at some point life gives you. You either pass that test or not. When do you do that, and how do you do that?
So it does not completely get rid of standardized testing. So competency-based education and PACE are two different things. Competency-based education is really kind of a mentality and approach to, we're not going to pass you. If you got a 65% in your algebra class, you still don't know 35% of the material. So I'm not going to make you go back and retake the whole class because you learned 65% of it. but you do need to go back and show how you're going to learn that other 35%. Once you start having conversations with people about this, Kevin and I presented to the Economic Council, not specific on this, but kind of on education in general. And, you know, it really becomes to, like, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, why wouldn't you want to meet individual student needs? Why wouldn't you want to hold all students to high expectations and give them opportunities? Why wouldn't we allow a student who's competing at a high level at a gym be able to make a personalized plan for how they're going to demonstrate their phys ed competencies? Why should that person have to sit through a traditional phys ed class if they can do it another way?
Brings up a good point. Assessment is extremely important, but it's not a one and done. Assessment takes place along the way. I always look at Smarter Balance as being an autopsy, right? They're done. No, it's true.
Yes,
The SAT,
absolutely.
those are terminal tests, if you
Right.
will, at a point in time. And I think it's extremely important to recognize, and we'll use Reader's Workshop as an example. There is so much ongoing assessment, conferring with students. They continuously are being assessed for learning. That's the feedback piece, for learning. How much feedback is this student getting on this type of project along the way, so that they can use that feedback to, again, engage in more meaningful learning along the way. You bet. They're going to have to, at some point, do an on-demand performance assessment. We can talk all we want about narrative writing, but at some point, you will have to answer the question about how well do you write narratively, or a persuasive piece. And those are sometimes on-demand. Sometimes those are summative assessments. Give me your best piece of work and revise it. Boom, done. So it is extremely important, but it's not ruling out that snapshot of, you're right, you have to run the race at some point, right? We can't just practice. At some point, you have to run the race.
And to use that persuasive writing as an example, could you do something where, to go back to what with you and Micah, you know, maybe the kids write a persuasive letter to the school board about why we should approve the pavilion. You know, I mean,
We did, that's how we started.
Yeah, and that's what you started with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the SAU and within the school, is that where we're going, where you don't have to take necessarily a state mandated assessment of your narrative writing, but you could have a teacher who's a professional do that?
There is still requirements, but it puts more control in the hands of the teachers.
Okay.
And it would be agreed upon. You know, there are certain standards that we want to ensure that
Of course,
all
yeah.
students are there.
Right.
But it's more collaborative,
Okay.
right? It's more collaborative amongst at least our sixth grade teachers, our fifth grade teachers along the way.
I'm excited about this. Also excited you're actually talking to our staff about it tomorrow. I think that's great. And
We're all
it's
excited about it.
it's one thing I think that we have a unique opportunity in Jackson to have is that our staff knows our students very well. They
Oh,
do the assessment end of it very, very well. And I think it's you know, we did hope to engage at some point with the staff this year too to talk about it. And at some point we need to engage the public with it as well, so that the translations happen, so that people accept and buy into what's going on. But I think it's a very exciting start.
Well, we're in the process, you know, for full disclosure. This isn't going to happen in a year or two here. The work that we have been doing has been ongoing for 2 years to even get to the point where we're looking at 3 or 4 years out before we're able to say, yeah, we're in a good place with this.
Cool. Moving on. Thanks, Katie. That's good. Gil?
All right. I have a number of things. The first one that's actually on the agenda is configuration. And I will pass these around. Just take one of those, and then there's some follow-up piece to that. You had asked, I believe, at the end of last year or in the fall, for us to take a longer look at configurations beyond just this next year. We've looked a lot at
we've done this year with the sixth grade, and your hopes as a board and our hopes as a faculty that our kiddos in the sixth grade would take more leadership within the building and have a more varied amount of experiences in leadership, the pavilion, all of those things, and they've been very successful. So we had put that all together and decided that definitely for next year, this configuration will be the standalone sixth grade. And then it could potentially be working the year after that as well. And I've included the numbers of students that we would expect. It's projection. Next year, we know pretty much, although we do expect that there are some new kiddos coming that we've heard about, and we know that there are a couple of kiddos that may be moving as well, so in and out. But at the moment, our recommendation is to go with the standalone 6 for the next 2 years. The third year after that was difficult to project because our numbers are, and the students that we have are difficult to predict at this point. So I'd like to wait on making that decision. But I also included, just so you know, I know at one of the meetings, maybe at our retreat, we mentioned the configuration process, and you had talked a little bit about wanting to move it or change it. So just so for your own information, the configuration process in October, the staff and I talk about potential configuration before I submit my budget to you, so that we know about any upcoming trends before I recommend any staffing changes and whatnot. And then we do have our universal team meetings and track student progress and make notes as to how they're doing academically, socially, emotionally, and all those things throughout the year. And then in March or April, we use our faculty meetings to have a formal meeting reviewing all of the information which you see on the back of that, in the order of priority. That's the guideline we use as a faculty to make that decision about our recommendation for configuration. Typically, it's April when I get the documents ready and finalize that. The staff has one more opportunity to look at who the children are. It's all grouped by the children, and I recommend to the board in May what the configuration will be. And then next month, typically I will recommend to you teacher assignments for those grade levels. Any questions about that?
Thanks for putting that together.
Yes, that's great.
It really helped clarify a lot.
Yeah.
So thanks for putting that together.
You're welcome. So that way, if you do decide that you'd like to do it differently, you at least have what's in place at the moment. If that looks good, then we'll stick with that, but then we will all know.
I'm trying to remember the month when you come and ask for, like for the example, the enrichment teacher this year. When does that happen? Is that October that happens?
In our budget
In our budget
process, right. I
process,
meet
yeah.
with the budget committee first typically.
Okay.
And we have what we normally have, and then I have a wish list where I'll ask for things that we don't currently have that I might feel are needed, or
Right.
changes I might want to make in the other direction. These are programs that we could cut, remove, or change. And then the budget committee, myself, Kevin, we all have a conversation with Jim Hill,
Yep.
facilities person, and Pam Stimson, special ed. We all talk together
Okay.
about that before that first budget comes to you.
I got you, and that's October.
It starts in October,
October.
November, and I
Okay.
think by December we're usually pretty much finished with
Okay.
that.
And I like the clarity on this because, our role as a board is to verify that there is a process. And to see the process is very helpful, and then to know if the process is being changed or there's a change in the process for, as you have the criteria there, it's helpful to know that, to understand it. Say, okay, when you come to us and say, well, we changed the configuration this year because of this. Now there's an understanding that we have so that there won't be as much resistance and better communications. And I think that it took us it wasn't you that wasn't doing that, it was us that wasn't doing that, and that's why it's nice to see this, because we needed to ask to verify.
So that's why I wanted to spell that out so we'd all know where we were, and then if there changes are desired, we can talk about that too.
Perfect.
All right, that's number one.
Thank you.
I just wanted to remind you, in last year's budget, we had a sign that we talked about, and that did not get done last summer. But however, you are going to see it done, so I just wanted to remind you of what it was going to look like. John has gotten an estimate for I forget what they call this type of rock, stack stone. I guess as opposed to the fieldstone. We had originally thought about fieldstone with cement, but he, in talking with his contractor, recommended that we go with the stacked stone. It's a lot more attractive and natural looking.
Where's it gonna go? Remember?
Right out on the front
Right in the
circle,
front.
right out here.
Where
Yeah.
the pumpkin people and stuff usually are in there.
Right, and I don't know if you've noticed, but that maple tree that's out there is really dead. We've been watching it kind of dying off, and it's not budding at all this spring, so that's going to be removed at some point.
So these lines below this would be changeable for
Right, that's what we
notices?
put in, open house tonight, 5 to 7, or welcome back to school, and
And do we
various
have the sign
meetings and
permits
things.
already from the town? Do we need this?
There's no sign.
There's no sign permit?
There's probably a building permit for it, but.
That's a question I'll refer to John. I don't have that information.
Is there a timeline for this?
Yes, the PO is in, and it needs to be done before July 1st, by July.
And this money was already,
Yeah, it was budgeted for earlier. It's coming out of our grounds contracted services line. There's a substantial amount of money left there, because that's where we put the fence originally.
okay.
So even though the stacked stone
I've got it.
is a little more costly than the field stone, we're still well within the amount of money that we budgeted, so.
Yeah, wait, I'll still follow up with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was an FYI item.
Is there no sign ordinances in Jackson?
There is, but it's not, this, it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Town's exempt anyway.
I'll ask John to
Except
check.
from yourself.
Yeah.
Check it.
Building and sign.
We don't have a sign ordinance, it's in our zoning ordinance, but it's not a, as long as it's not backlit and plastic, it'll be all right.
Okay, that's it for tonight.
Gail, I did want to talk about Blizzardbacks with the staff.
Sure.
Not me, but like if you have a chance in the staff meeting to.
We have already had a conversation about how it went this year and what our recommendations might be going forward. And I feel like the first 3 were well carried out by the kiddos. Our faculty is having correspondence. Most of our people are online. So we're using the Google framework for the older kiddos, and the younger kiddos have paper packets that they're bringing home. We've had good response. However, that last one, that 4th one, we didn't get as good a response. We still scraped over at the 80%, but we also got some feedback from parents that maybe 4 was too many, and the staff felt like 4 was too many.
And that's kind of why I'm asking, because when we adopted the Blizzardbacks, we gave the flexibility to administration
Right.
to say, do what you want with it, but at that point in time, Carl had said that he would never allow more than 2 anyway. So we were comfortable without having to putting a cap on it, and obviously that was 4 years ago now, I think, at this point, so it's, I wouldn't expect that it would have been translated into today, but I did get a lot of pushback from parents saying that 3 and 4 were too much. So I guess what I'd like to see is that maybe in June, while it's fresh in everybody's mind, is for us to just to report on it and say, if the staff's already had the input, that's great, but I don't know if you could ask the staff if maybe like a monkey survey to parents might be good to get some feedback from parents, unless you've already got it and could report back to us on that, because
I haven't done a parent survey, but we did talk about it as a staff.
Because I think at some point the board should
Put a number on it.
have a discussion about it.
Wasn't there a
and
cap
perhaps-
of 5 days? It was
Well, it's
before
5
the
days by the state.
By the
They
state,
allow
okay.
5 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we kicked around waiting till the 3rd day before we broke them out. We kicked around a lot of stuff when we finally approved them that too. So we should
And it was
probably
the first
look
year,
at
the first year we did it, and Carl said, this first year I won't do more than 2. And that was the first year, we never really talked about it since that first year, and at some point we should have a conversation about it, and it'd be nice to have some feedback from staff and from parents in that conversation, because we can't just make the decision blind, so if you're confident the staff's had enough feedback, and the staff thinks that they've got enough feedback from parents, that you can report to us on it, so that we can make a decision about should we cap it at something or not, because it's easier for me to say anecdotally at this point, I think that 2 was plenty and 3 was too much, certainly from my own experience anyway, but also from the whole idea about it isn't just so that we don't have to go to school June 16th and 17th.
Right.
The idea is the continuity in education, and is it actually achieving that? So I guess what I'd be looking for at our next meeting is can you get some feedback on that? Is it achieving what it's supposed to? Not just getting us out of school at the end of the year, but also, is it achieving the academic piece of it?
Are we the only school left doing them?
Madison's still doing it.
In SAU 9, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because me, if it's achieving the academic piece to it, parents are still complaining about the fact that they didn't like it, and they would prefer their kid to go to school June 16th and 17th because that's what matches with the middle school, matches with the high school. And those are things that we'll need to consider in determining whether we move forward with it or not.
Okay, so I'll put out a survey and,
Well, just check with the staff if you need. If you think you've already gotten enough feedback from parents, the staff, like, then
well, I did hear from some people who were definitely not for it on the fourth one.
Yeah, I only had a couple.
We had a few, yeah. So I can put that together for you easily, what we heard back.
Because, I mean, a survey might be
However, we
good.
didn't hear from people who said they were great, I wish you'd do them all the time, so.
You don't usually
We
hear from
usually hear
people.
from the people who are not happy, not the people who are happy with them.
I know from a parent of a couple of high school kids that they did not like it, Conway.
No.
They said that they did more work that day than they do on a normal day at school.
Cool, thanks. Back to citizen comments.
I have something that I didn't tell you all about the pavilion. In terms of support that we reach out, I'm not even sure if Kevin knows, we got on the email with everybody we knew that included the folks at the Career Tech. And Mr. Riddensdale has one kid who's learning how to use a Revit program instead of AutoCAD to take John's drawings and do them on a building. And Andy said that the metal shop would do the hinge or connection between the post and the cement. So with the architect the other day, we talked about a job for the buildings trades folks. So we've included all of those kids too. So then it becomes kind of a greater community learning experience. So.
No little house, though.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Moving on, board member issues. Next meeting, June 19th at 6 p.m.
Can I just jump in with a quick clarification for board member issue? So from our last meeting, I know Katie was working up the notes from that, and then we were going to schedule a June work session. Is that in addition to our board meeting? I know rescheduling.
Yes, if we're going to try to involve the faculty, that's why we're waiting till tomorrow
Okay,
to
great.
see
Perfect. Okay.
their availability, and then we can kind of work with you guys email-wise.
Okay, I just remember while we were
Pull it all together.
that next meeting. Perfect. Thank you.
But it would be prior to that, yes.
Thank you.
That's the goal.
At our April 12th meeting, Dan Mahoods submitted a letter of resignation from the school board effective immediately. So Dan Mahoods no longer is school board member, and we are looking for the school board vacancy. We posted one advertisement already.
It was advertised.
And I don't think we need to post it again, or probably that first one is good enough. We'll need to go out and recruit some people, and I feel that we've got some names in mind.
Have we got responses?
No.
Oh, okay. So we should let people know.
So you should, or actively recruit, or...
Peter, you're here.
So there the stars from the last
Just next year.
It's actually,
And I actually, numerous people that have asked me, but I technically have direct conflict of interest with my work and the school board now, since the Whitney Center got built, so that's my
We could all say that.
That's my golden parachute. I'm sticking to it.
it is actually helpful though to have your advice as a non-school board member, because you're free to say things that.
Sometimes you can have more power from the other side.
Definitely.
So thank you for that.
Anyway. Thank you, I thought about it. Maybe someday.
So we'll have to recruit somebody
Okay.
for the June